Well, 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 what do we have here? The Barbarians, Part 2. So, following the introduction of the Barbarian faction in Part 1, this week we'll take a look at the first 3 of their unit types and some general combat mechanics, all part of the upcoming Warriors of the North DLC, of course. As always, keep in mind that things are still in development and may change. With that said, let's delve in. Thralls. The Northern Barbarians are not born free, but as thralls in servitude to their elders, and ultimately their tribe. They have no say on tribal matters, and they may possess only what they can carry. On occasion, the members of other tribes are also accepted into thralldom, either peacefully or after being captured in battle. It is expected that a thrall seek the respect of their master, their ancestors, and the tribe as a whole, and ultimately earn their status as a free man or woman. Indeed, young folk are considered to have reached adulthood as they become free, and to have then earned their place and say in the tribe. One way to do so, but not the only one, is to prove their worth in battle. Thralls are the light and nimble infantry of the barbarian tribes, clad only in furs and sometimes with nothing but war paint on their bare chests, armed either with weapons made from readily available materials like bone or looted from the battlefield. They rely on ferociously overwhelming the enemy. They are quick and agile, making ample use of the adrenaline skill, and having both the anticipation and dodge perks makes them harder to hit, at least until they've exhausted themselves after a couple of rounds. Oh, that doesn't... oh god. So our archers are really going to struggle. Like all barbarian infantry, Thralls have a very physical combat style of wrestling with the enemy, throwing their weight against them and jostling to put their opponent out of balance. Their barbarian wrath perk makes them fight even harder as they get hit, and the next time they land a hit of their own, they confer a status effect which for one turn knocks the target out of balance to lower their damage and defense until they have regained their footing. Oh shit! Okay, before we go on to the Reavers, a few things tactically are jumping out at me. The first thing that I don't like to hear is that they have anticipation and dodge, so it's not like you can soften them up as they run towards you. At least, like with Orc Young, you can pepper them with arrows as they approach. Okay, so I don't think spear walls are going to be that useful against them. I think maybe you're better off putting up a shield wall and letting them tucker themselves out after a turn or two. But if they have overwhelm as well, that's going to be pretty horrifying. And when these guys are mixed in with the tougher guys, oh, friggin' hell, this is going to be hard. Already, right off the bat, they strike me as mid to late game type enemies you want to be fighting, because fighting them early on, when your own guys simply don't have the stats, this is going to be really hard to deal with. Next up, Reavers. Reavers are the medium infantry of the barbarian tribes. They are battle-hardened freemen, yet not necessarily warriors by trade. Some may be bloodthirsty veterans of many battles that seek immortality through their deeds on the battlefield, and have tattoos on their skin, and have tattoos on their skin tell the saga of their life. Others are merely hunters or craftsmen that join with the rest of the tribe to raid and ensure their survival in the upcoming winter. Reavers are often armed with armor and weapons that have been passed down through generations and show signs of wear, but may have also claimed equipment in duels that settle disputes. Like Thralls, they have an offensive and nimble combat style, but backed up with experience and skill. Like all barbarians, they don't fear death the same as southern folk do, and are not easily broken. They are roughly comparable to brigand raiders, but may be more or less of a challenge depending on your approach. So that's interesting if they're setting up these guys as being thugs and these guys being raiders, because based on the skills, that doesn't sound like they're thugs. That sounds like they're too strong to be thugs. The other thing is this barbarian wrath perk makes them fight even harder as they get hit. So does that mean increased damage, increased dodge, increased melee skill? They can quickly get out of hand if they start getting stacks of that. How long is that going to last? This is even more worrying. So not only do they buff themselves when they get hit, they debuff you when they do hit. So you can get overwhelmed so quickly with these guys. And if these dudes have that as well, oof, that sounds fucking terrifying. Last but not least, champions. Warriors who show exceptional skill on the battlefield are said to be blessed by the ancestors, and those who also have impressive victories to show are said to eventually take a place beside the ancestors in the afterlife to watch over the tribe. These champions of the ancestors are the heavy infantry of the barbarians, and they wear weighty metal armor and heavy two-handed weapons. Trophies from vanquished foes and gifts from invested elders. Unlike Thralls and Reavers, champions rely on their heavy armor for defense. They can shrug off status effects more easily, and excel even when fighting against several opponents at once. Tougher enemies than any brigand, other than perhaps brigand leaders, they are mid to late game opponents. Okay. Interesting. So, status effects more easily, so they have that perk that means, I forget what it's called, I think it's called Shrug It Off. Status effects only last one turn. And they excel even when fighting against several opponents at once. So they have that underdog perk, so you don't get extra chance to hit from surrounding them. It'll be interesting to know whether or not Backstabber will still proc on them. Honestly, I'm not exactly too sure on the interaction between Backstabber and Underdog. It'll be interesting to find out. It's too early to tell because I haven't actually fought against them, but just based on the skill description, I think like the difficulty of this is skewed too much towards the Thralls. Like the Thralls, it doesn't sound like they should have anticipation, dodge, adrenaline, barbarian wrath, buff themselves when they get hit, debuff you when they hit you. That sounds like that's too much. But if these guys have all that stuff as well, well, I mean, the Reavers might do, but the champions, I assume, don't have anticipation and dodge, because it says here they rely just on their armor for defense. Super, super, super interesting. I would have to do some play testing to work out some tactics against the Thralls and the Reavers, but looking at the champions, I'm seeing possible use for this new build that I'm experimenting with called the Torturer, which is a three-headed flail specialist with Overwhelm, Adrenaline, and oh god, what's that perk called that makes them roll a resolve on every hit? That could be quite good against these guys, because you can potentially get 6 Overwhelm stacks on them with a dagger, or 4 with a three-headed flail. God, I must say I'm less excited about this, but more nervous now. But a lot of it is going to come down to the same sort of experience I've had with the Shrut and the Lindworm, which is the first couple times you fight them, you have no idea of where to place them in context of the difficulty of the other enemies. So you end up taking the fights against them too early. I've taken fights against Shrut, I'm like, oh, it's only 2 Shrut. But then my entire team gets wrecked. But now I have an idea in my mind of where my squad needs to be before I take them on. And I think a big deal of fighting these the barbarians is going to be understanding what kind of damage output and what they are capable of when, and just avoiding them until certain times. But what's interesting is they seem to be positioning the Northmen to be roughly equal with regular brigands, if not a bit stronger, yet the description of the Thralls alone sounds way overpowered. Unless they exhaust themselves after the second turn, in which case you just shield up, they run in, they use adrenaline, start of the next turn, they're too exhausted to even use anything more than 1 attack. Then all these skills that they have sounds balanced. But if they can attack for more than 3 turns, because Spear Wars ain't going to do shit against them, especially if they have shields. They've got anticipation, they've got dodge. So here's your front line. They run in, and you've gone just for a Spear Wall. They get past it, let's say half the time. It's early on, so you don't have Spear Specialists, so you've got your Spears get defeated on that first turn. They use anticipation at the end of that turn, so they get to attack before the next turn. They hit you to debuff you and buff themselves. If that's then all the fatigue they have, then on the next turn, they will first attack before you do, because their initiative will be higher, but they can only attack once. If they can attack twice on that third turn, most of it's going to come down to how that third turn goes down. But even if you're fighting just the Thralls, that's difficult enough. But then let's consider it's a mixed group of Thralls and Reavers. So you shield up to let the Thralls exhaust themselves, but by that point the Reavers are on you. The Reavers are on you, breaking your shields and just beating the shit out of you. My hope is that the Reavers are not going to have anticipation and dodge, because then at least your crossbowmen or your archers that have fearsome can at least do some work against them. I have a lot of questions. I'm excited to play against them, but I'm also pretty terrified. As always, let me know what you guys think, and some theory crafting in the comments of what you think. Do you agree with what I've said? Do you think the Thralls sound a little overpowered? My intuition tells me they're a little too strong and they're going to have to tweak that. The other thing I'm keen to hear from you guys is how you, based on this, how you think you're going to play against them, firstly, and secondly, at what point in the game they are going to start being fightable. Like, my gut feeling tells me for the first 90 days, maybe 120, I'm not going to want to touch these guys. It's just because their armor is not going to be that great, and their weapons are not going to be that great. So much like with the legionaries and the auxiliaries, I have no incentive to fight them whatsoever. So you just avoid until you can fight them risk-free. Okay, friends, thanks for watching. This is Devblog 118, The Barbarians Part 2. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and a sub, and let me know what you think in the comments. I want to get some theory crafting. There's also a link to my Discord where I've got Battle Brothers channels. Feel free to jump in there and discuss this. There are a bunch of my viewers who are in there and very knowledgeable and might be able to shed a lot more light on this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys either in my dedicated playthroughs on YouTube, streaming soon, hopefully April or May, and yeah, at the next Devblog. Cheers guys, see you next time.